I'm Andy. Our next talk is Tales from the Audit, and we are starting now. So here's Justin.
Thank you, guys. This is obviously the most popular talk of the day, right? So I wanted to do something a little bit loose, a little bit, something not as a common thing. When I was thinking about actually submitting for B-sides, nobody wants to hear kind of the governance risk compliance, which is kind of my field of expertise. But the thing that I collect a lot of the times is these awesome stories from regulators, auditors, customers, whatever it is, and just the shocking nature that you get from all these different people. And actually, some of the people in the audience will actually recognize some of the stories, and they're just gems. So it's supposed to be very light, and I'm glad everybody's drinking beer, so it'll actually be more funny this time. But a little bit about me, I actually just broke back into the consulting thing. Was consultant, went back into private industry, running security programs, and back into consulting work with David Kennedy. A lot of you guys obviously know him and everything. But we're basically going to be focusing on a number of different areas, and I got stories on all of them. And it is just amazing some of the things that people will say out of this. So first up, regulators. Anybody deal with financial regulators? This is mostly on the FFIEC and some of the different aspects. Don't you love them? So my first story, do you monitor for? So to set this up, this is when I was actually working at Diebold. And at Diebold, we were labeled as one of the privileged critical service providers. That basically means that we service a number of the financial industries and got the privilege to get all the organizations, the OCC, the FDIC, NCUA, all came to our building for about a month-long audit. And as we were going through this, it so happens that the FDIC was actually the lead examiner, but everybody was there. What was really funny, the lead examiner was a spitting image of Bill Nye. Like, seriously, Bill Nye to a T, except he had glasses. But he was more the Ben Stein attitude, like the Bueller, like no personality, did not get sarcasm at all. So we're coming back. I was letting him in the building after he went out to lunch. And he came back and he's like, hey, Justin, on the news, I saw there was a bunch of solar flares that were acting up. And the news said that they could actually interrupt some communication. I was like, oh yeah, I saw that on the news when I was eating my lunch and everything. What does Diebold do to monitor for solar flares? And how do you respond to that? So literally, we're sitting in the hallway. I'm like, oh man, I started cracking up laughing. I'm like, like a bastard operator from hell story, it's solar flares is the problem. But literally, this is me laughing, and the examiner's on the other side. Yeah, man, that's not that funny. And then, of course, you say, this is one of the things that you should never say to an examiner that I said. It's like, oh, you're serious. And then, of course, I'm trying to collect myself from laughing even more from this. I'm like, this guy's serious. I cannot believe he wants me to monitor for solar flares. So I'm collecting myself. I'm like, let me get with my BCP guy, network architect. I'll get back to you. I ran upstairs, and I'm like, guys, you will not believe the question I just got. And then I sent an email out. Our network architecture guy emailed back. He's like, guys, we already have a plan for this. It's called wrapping all our equipment in tinfoil. It's good. We're all good. We're doing it, and everything. Later, it's actually kind of funny. After the solar flares happen, we get a notice from the FSISAC, if you guys are familiar with that. We get an email notice 2 days later after it already happened, hey, watch out for these solar flares, and everything. Very funny. So, next one. Need this in your BCP. So, to set this up, this was when I was actually a consultant. We did a lot of audit assistance, things of that nature. And this one credit union called us up and said, hey guys, I really need somebody to help us prepare for an NCUA audit. kind of guide us through and kind of be the person, kind of our point person in front of the NCUA auditor. So I went out there, literally, it was a one branch credit union, one building in the middle of a farm field in Ohio. Like, as little as capital as you can actually count, this is what this credit union was. So going over like some of the stuff from prior, the previous examiner came in and said, guys, I noticed there was a airport 5 miles away from your site. You need a specific response if a helicopter crashes into your building. And she's like, really? Like, what are the chances of that? No, they already had one on a fire. They needed one if a helicopter crashed into their building. Like, oh, that's crazy. She's like, no, that's not even the best part. She's like, then he required that if all the roads were shut down, you need to prove that you can get into work. Like, literally, all the roads were shut. She physically, and she showed me the evidence of this, had to take a picture of a bicycle out of her garage and prove to them that she had ways to get into work if all the roads were shut down. She could have taken that. Probably why they were worried about actually crashing into the building, right? Like, literally, if the zombie apocalypse happened, she would have to make it into work, you know, type of thing. She honestly said to me, she's like, this was the owner of the credit union. Like, if all the roads are shut down, I'm not coming into work. And I'm like, I understand that, yes. So, yeah, it's amazing to me, like, some of the regulars, and apologize to any regulars in the audience here, but that they can kind of be the kings of the kingdom, and even though they never ran anything in their life, and say statistically you need a helicopter BCP plan, but yeah, don't worry about that fire one, and have to have a bike. So customers, this is one that's awesome. You know, like, we do a lot of different risk assessments right now in my current job, and when I was previously with consulting. And sometimes you just got gems of stories with that. Probably more side on the pen testing, but with this story here, you know, are you looking for policies? So to set this up, basically we were hired by the CFO of the company, and they had some offices at another different location, which is where their main IT location was. The CFO literally was hiring us to audit their IT department. So already an adversarial type of thing. In fact, I think he actually said that the CIO was an ass, and I'm hiring him to do a risk assessment on him and all this stuff. So already bad news to start off with. Got to be careful of that. So anyways, we start the engagement, and going through, my main contact is the IT manager. We're going through one of the sections, obviously, let me see your policies, procedures, see how thorough, complete they are. So he literally hands me a user manual, and there's nothing in it about security. It's just, treat everybody well, some ethics, that's it. Nothing on technical standards, nothing on how to run your security program at all. And literally, as I'm like walking into his room, seriously, this was like a Hoarders commercial edition, that he had piles of paper, no doubt, like off this table, this high, all around his U-shaped desk and all over the floor. And I don't know if you guys ever did this, but I'm like, nobody in the office is going to believe me. I'm like, checking email, snap. So literally, I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. So we go through that, not really a lot of policies and everything, but I'm meeting with the CIO to discuss business continuity planning. So we're talking about that and all, what they're doing and everything. So at the end of our conversation, he's like, Justin, I saw one of your sections is policies. We have some policies. I'm like, oh, really? Because we talked about it, and it was only like a user manual, nothing really in it and everything. He's like, no, we got policies. He reaches into his desk drawer, pulls out a folder, hands it to me. Literally, this folder is labeled audit. And I'm like, all right, this is going to be awesome, type of thing. So I flip through it, and they're awesome policies. There's like 6 pages, full of content, great, like hitting on all the topics and everything. The problem is, like, we got in a conversation before, I realized he was an ex-Visa director or something like that. Total copy, like just a find and replace on this. And I don't really ask this question a lot, but once you get like, oh yeah, he's handing me a folder with audit, I have my doubts. I'm like, are these policies actually being enforced in the organization? The guy, the total honesty says, oh, of course not. Way too expensive to enforce all the policies. That's crazy. Like literally, and I actually looked it up for this presentation. This is what I actually wrote in the report for their policy. Like, and I was reading it again. I was like, maybe I was a little harsh to basically say that basically it's only worth the paper that they're printed on, type of thing. But literally, they had policies that they didn't enforce at all, type of thing. And just like the brazenness of like, these are policies, why do we enforce them? They're for audit, type of thing. So this is a good story about, this is when I was at Diebold, and I don't know if you guys know or not, but I actually reported to Dave Kennedy, the CSO of Diebold at the time. And he was famous whenever we did an audit, and we did a lot of audits. So there was customers auditing us, different regulations that we had to do an audit. He'd come in for, we do day, 2 day, 3 days, month long sometime. He'd come in to sit down for the audit, just make sure everything is going all right. He'd literally pull out his computer and do a set demo for whoever the audience was. He would actually do a set demo for whoever. We actually tried to plan it out that if we're like in hot water for an audit, that we'd actually have Kennedy come in and do a set demo. It was like, hey, shiny over here and everything. So we're doing an audit with a customer, like, how are you doing with our security? What are you monitoring for? All that stuff. The auditor actually came in. It's like, oh, do you know what phishing is? Asking Dave Kennedy this, He's like, yeah, I'm pretty familiar with it. Wrote a couple of tools about it. He's like, oh, okay. Let me tell you what phishing is. Like, this is the guy that wrote SET, and he already had SET created at this point. This guy went on to tell Kennedy about phishing, So, and after that, it's like, oh, okay, like, let me show you an example of it. Like, and of course, if anybody knows Dave Kennedy, this is how he actually gives a demo. You don't know how he types what he's wanting to type. Literally lightning fast across it. Well, the main customer that we were doing, he actually came out after Kennedy left. He's like, I really don't know what he did, but that was amazing. I had no idea, but it was awesome. And it was pretty funny with that there. So next one, employees. So when you're dealing with employees, especially when they're confronted with being under the spotlight with audits, sometimes you get some funny reactions. And I'm going to tell one just because time-wise, I'm going pretty fast. We're doing one of the FFIEC examinations here. And one of the things that you always prep your kind of audience of who's going to be audited and tell them, hey, don't be dishonest. You want to give good answers, but don't elaborate. Don't feel like if there's an awkward pause in the silence that you need to actually give more information. It's always good advice to anybody going under the spotlight to this. So we had one guy on our team that took that to heart. We had an examiner talking about like user provisioning and all that stuff, and he was going over what we did for our Unix Linux systems. And he was going over all the details with that. And of course, if anybody's, familiar with, auditing or just, general questions, there's open questions and closed questions. Closed questions are, you can answer with a yes or no, one word. Open questions like, okay, you need to give a response, type of thing. So this guy literally said, oh, is that the same to your Windows systems as well as you provision? Guy's like, yes. Awkward silence. Like, there was no talking in 10 seconds, And as you're like sitting in an audit, you're like, okay, yeah, he's not asking any more questions and everything. Literally, like, after that, he's like, oh, the examiner, okay. Didn't ask one more question with that there. So here's one with dealing with PCI. So we had a QSA in, and he wasn't the most technically minded. He came from a law enforcement background. Just kind of set this up and everything. But we're going through, we're actually an acquirer and talking about where we store cardholder data and what the process is and how we actually interconnect everything. So the QSA actually came out and said, can you show me where the data is stored to one of our mainframe guys and everything? Guy came down, he's like, I can't show you where the data is stored. It could be anywhere on the disk. Like, literally, he thought, like, where on the platter is cardholder data? Like, it's like asking where the woman in the red dress is on the matrix. Like, the guy had no idea. And the funniest thing about this is the QSA looked at me like, is that right? I don't know. Like, at this point, I'm literally doing the Picard, like, I was like, John is his name, but John, I think he means the path to where the cardholder data is stored. He's like, oh, yeah, I could show him that, yeah. Like, where would your mind go to show platter, like, disk level on this and everything? So this is another great one. Awareness. So we're talking about at an organization, like, what to do to spruce up awareness, what other things we can do. We did a week-long awareness thing for every week. I think it was in November. And like, okay, what more can we spruce up with our awareness? So we're throwing out some different ideas, what we can do different from the last year and everything. And, just different awareness posters, all that stuff and everything. So the one guys, and they're kind of gun nuts, and I'm all for guns and everything. They're like, hey, there's a big thing, there was just an active shooter a few months ago, type of thing. Why don't we do awareness like that? And I was like, that's a great idea. Why don't we do awareness around active shooter? He's like, why don't we run in ski masks and take over a conference room as kind of a mock active shooter situation? Like, literally, he and another guy was like, let's take over a conference room, and this will be the awareness. Bad idea. Like, can you imagine who would get shot during that if somebody was concealed carrying or cops were called? They would not be happy with that organization. So, consultants. These are some of my favorite ones here. Because even though, like, most of the consultants you hire them to perform a job, to give you different advice and everything. But sometimes they're crazy. Like, they look at stuff and just have a backwards view of things. So, first story on this, is encrypted. Another PCI story. I got tons of PCI stories. So this was when I was at an organization where we were getting an audit done. So, and one of the things you do is you show them where the cardholder data is stored. I got a lot of cardholder data stored stories for some reason. So anyway, so we're going into the database and looking at where cardholder data is stored, actual database tables, all that stuff and everything. And I did a mock example here. This is my own database. I'm not showing the actual picture. But I'm showing them the database, and I'm kind of a sarcastic guy. I was like, yeah, as you can see, everything's encrypted unless you can read wingdings. You won't be able to, read it and everything. He's like, is that what that is, wingdings? I'm like, no, man, it's binary data trying to be rendered on the screen. Oh, that's what that is. So after he left and everything, I run into our IT office like, guys, I got a great idea for our new encryption strategy. We're just changing the font to wingdings. So like, this is awesome, type of thing. Another one that we had, customer hired another consultant to kind of audit us against ISO and a number of other different regulations and stuff of that nature. So, and one of the things, he was a little weird. Everybody in security is a little weird, type of thing. But this guy, was just a little off, but we didn't see it through the audit and everything like that. Well, one of the things that are pretty common, you go out to dinner with the customer and, just have a good time and everything. And the one girl that was on my team, younger girl, this is her first job and everything, got the pleasure of sitting next to him. And I think she was sitting next to me, but far enough that I wasn't hearing their conversation. We're all talking and everything, and all of a sudden there was like a break. Like, a couple people went to the bathroom. And he went to the bathroom, and she turns to me, he's like, why did you sit me next to him? I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, it can't be that bad and everything. He's like, no. He literally has a doll collection. And they all have personalities, he told me. I'm like, no, come on. It can't be that weird, and everything. He's like, no, it's weird. So from that point, I'm like, I want to hear what's going on over here, So we're talking and everything, and he's going on about like, oh yeah, our anniversary's coming up for, me and my wife and everything. And I think I'm going to get her matching chainsaws and chaps, I'm like, yeah, that's a good gift. Yeah, do that. And it even goes beyond that. This guy was a weird guy, like one of those things like, all right, we're not leaving anybody alone with him, even me. Like, don't leave me alone with him. And he even said at one point, like, he had a bigger body. I'm a fat guy. He had a bigger body style to me, and he was like, yeah, I only stay at hotels that have 24/7 gym service. I'm like, really, buddy? Like, you use them at all? So, yeah, it's amazing, the people that you get with that. This last one was actually recent-ish, a couple of years ago and everything. So, another PCI story. Love the PCI stories and everything. So this is a little bit over an email exchange, but we actually had a QSA come in, and this is when I first started with an organization. It was when I first started in June. The QSA actually came out in March to actually do an audit for us. Like, okay, great. I start in June. I'm like, are we getting the rock back anytime soon? It's been 3 months and everything. He's like, yeah, he's expecting a couple more documents. So we get it all to him. I'm like, all right, buddy. So when can we got all the evidence, you have all the evidence? Yeah, I have all the evidence. Okay. When can I get my rock? I don't know. Like, it's going to take probably another 4 months to get the rock. I'm like, you're freaking kidding me, right? Like, you're not taking 7 months to produce a rock for me and everything. And of course he comes at me, he's like, yeah, I don't know if you know anything about the PCI industry, but it takes a while, type of thing. I was like, dude, I was a QSA before. It doesn't take this long. I expect the rock in a week, type of thing. You've had 3 months. I just gave you some final evidence. Like, oh, okay. He eventually gets me the rock 2 days from there. But in between that time, he's like, oh, by the way, I need the version of your AV on your Linux systems. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I was like, we don't have AV on our Linux systems because we don't commonly affect, they're not commonly affected by viruses, type of thing. He's like, well, you need something, you need that AV on your Linux systems there. I'm like, dude, explain to me why AV is effectively required on our systems when they're not commonly affected by viruses. So he comes at me, he's like, hey, they're still vulnerable to malware, and it won't go past our QA, type of thing. So I don't know if you guys ever done that. I basically shoot it back. I'm like, dude, reread the standard. It says commonly affected. I was like, you need to tell me that Linux systems are commonly affected by viruses, or it's an NA, type of thing. So he comes back. Never seen an instance of malware on a Linux machine. Like, yes, but there's a separation between security and compliance, and I don't equate them to the same thing. So, of course, I fire back to the company. I'm not interested in you pushing an agenda of security controls, type of thing. So, at this point, he says he was involved with it. I didn't believe him. And to top it all off, his QSA never came on site once for this audit. So, which is, if you're a QSA, is not allowed. You have to be on site at some point during the issuance of a rock. So he comes back, QA has spoke, here's what you can do to avoid AV being on your Linux systems. He gives me this laundry list of things, which some of them actually do apply to PCI, which is valid, they have to be there for some of the controls with that. And some of them don't, like not surfing from the internet, Security, I'm not arguing security versus compliance, but I'm like, guys, you're not doing your job, with this here. His boss gets into the email chain, and at this point, their VP of compliance actually is CC'd into this. And this is a large company. Not to name any names, but it starts with a T, ends in wave. Yeah, I'm not naming any names, type of thing. So his boss comes in. He's like, yeah, and it was a lot longer. I'm sparing you some of the details and everything. But he basically says, our criteria for measuring AV on systems is, can it get viruses? And is there a remediation for it? That was their two criteria for it. Not the commonality of it actually being exposed with that. And then he actually gives a great thing of what they're actually saying. They're like, hey, some card brands and some big acquirers have actually told us that we want more protection on systems. Not that it actually is in the PCI standard, we just want more protection. So can you guys actually push that for us? There. Actually in an email, actually documented, this is verbatim, with a little bit of some of the stuff cut out and everything. So I basically come back to them and like, guys, that's not what the standard says. You need to apply the commonality of it. And if it is, and I don't think I put this in there, I was like, I want a letter from you that actually says you're considering systems like this in there. Now, here's the gem. So I go back to the previous year ROC. They actually had in their verbiage in the 5.1 for Linux, Unix systems, which are not commonly affected by viruses. They actually had that in the last year's ROC. And I'm like, guys, if that's the case, tell me what changed. It's like, either you do consider them commonly affected by viruses, which is great, or you don't, then it's NA, for the systems. So he comes back to the QSA boss, is like, the control sounds like it's the same control as last year. I don't understand the problem. The problem is we've never had AV on our Linux systems. They actually even had a different version of AV in the ROC that they actually cited us for. We were using like Kaspersky, and they cited us like, oh yeah, they have semantic on their Linux systems and everything. Like, called them out, even said like, guys, you're the first ones that didn't come on site. You're the first ones that basically told me that, it takes like 7 months to actually complete a ROC. And you're the first ones that actually tell me that AV is effectively on all systems here. So the next day, they're like, oh yeah, we need to do a conference call. Call me up. Some of their senior people are like, yeah, Justin, you're right. We don't need to do that. And oh, by the way, we need to send somebody out there, because we're not allowed to issue a ROC without sending somebody out there. We're like, I know that. So they send somebody out there. They were literally on there at 1 hour. 1 hour they were there on our site. Somebody flew out for 1 hour, looked at a couple of background checks, and just talked to me in my office. No evidence, nothing like that. And at the time, the company I was with was both an issuer and an acquirer. Like, we actually stored card track data because we were obligated to do that. We actually imprinted card track data on there. Didn't look at any of those systems, and everything. So just kind of a foreshadow. Don't always trust your QSA. I say that, I'm a QSA now. Don't always trust your QSA. Go back with facts and everything and kind of do that. The last story, since I got a little bit of time and everything, that I didn't put in, but it is still kind of funny. It's not really a customer employee. This was actually a boss at the time. So I was out on the road consulting. We're up in Seattle, I believe it was. And we're doing a generalized risk assessment, kind of big governance overview with it. My boss and I were going out. And it's not Dave Candy, by the way, so just FYI. So we're going out, and the customer was cool, so we go out in the town for Seattle. And to save on money, we're splitting a hotel room and everything. So we go, and, we're drunk, we're, going in a hotel room at 1 a.m. or something like that. Both go to bed and everything. I wake up with an arm draped around me as I'm like sleeping in my own bed and everything. I'm like, and of course you wake up and you're like, what the hell is this? I look over, it's my boss spooning me. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? He's like, oh shit. He gets up and goes like into the bathroom and everything. And of course, me, I'm like, underwear. Okay, underwear, still on. All right, good. I wake up the next morning. He's like, dude, what was going on? He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you crawled into bed with me. He's like, no, I didn't. Like, yeah, we did have 2 beds. It wasn't a sharing that, Skippy. It was 2 double beds. Yeah. He's like, I don't remember that. So, yeah, it's pretty funny with that there. I think I did actually share a bed with Candy at one point, but totally straight at everything. So that's about it, guys. I'm a little bit short on time, but enjoy the conference and have a good one.